Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. We have 3 more movies to talk about. Let's get started. Onward is an animated family film by Pixar Animation Studios. It takes place in a fantasy world where 2 brothers set out to bring back their father who they barely knew. And it sets them on a quest for fun. So when I saw Toy Story 4, I was kind of struck by the photorealistic nature of that film. And this movie was an interesting viewing experience because while it has those photorealistic aspects, like the textures are really good and look real, Pixar very much made this movie look like it was in a fantasy world. It didn't go for super photorealistic in it. And the movie's better for that. It wasn't as distracting as Toy Story 4 was. But this is a movie kind of like Inside Out, where it's a solid Pixar movie that's entertaining, that doesn't need 1,000 sequels, doesn't need toys made. It's just a fun movie to enjoy. It's a one and done story, but it's told very well. Pixar's very good at doing this type of fantasy thing. And this is high concept fantasy. This is Dungeons and Dragons stuff set in a real world, and it's a lot of fun. Tom Holland and Chris Pratt are very good in their roles. They have a lot of chemistry. They sound like they are in the same room together, which I can't say about a lot of Disney movies. But this is an adventure picture that kind of feels like the Goonies in a way. They're off on a quest to do a thing, and there's always new obstacles in their way. And I enjoyed my time with these characters trying to figure out how to get to the next step in their journey. And I said in my Toy Story reviews that my favorite Pixar movies are the ones where they find transcendence, and this movie finds it in its final act. I don't feel like this was a movie made for me, but it's certainly made for a specific someone who it will hit home for. Yeah, Pixar does great stuff. What can I say? Oh, except for Cars. Spaceship Earth is a 2020 documentary film about the geosphere. About the geosphere.
The geosphere? It's the biosphere. Don't worry, I said it about 250,000 times in this part of the review. It's been a long year, everybody. Just ignore every time I say geosphere. I meant biosphere. Back to the show.
Now, I may date myself by saying this, but when I was a child, the geosphere was like a big thing. This was a big media event. A group of scientists were going into an encapsulated, sealed environment to live for a number of years to kind of play like what it would be like to colonize a new planet. They specifically had Mars in mind. And I remember as a child talking with my friends about what it would be like to live in the geosphere. But what I didn't know was everything else having to do with this documentary. The geosphere background is a little sketchy. The people that put it together were kind of part of a cult. And the scientists they picked to go inside weren't necessarily the best to go inside. Like the doctor that went inside had some very strange theories about health. And if you think about it for 2 seconds, they went into a biodome that was fully stocked with animals and plants. Like if you're going to Mars, wouldn't you have to grow that stuff yourself?
In the face of overwhelming odds, I'm left with only one option. I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
And because of this, the geosphere was somewhat ostracized from the medical community, from the science community. They didn't think their findings held any weight. So the question became within the media, is this science or is this a sideshow? And of course, it didn't take long before things started going poorly for the people inside the geosphere. And that's when you find out these sketchy ways they tried to cheat the system. There's also a bad guy in the 3rd act of this documentary who I didn't see coming. Of course, if I would have done any research before watching the documentary, I would have seen his name and expected it. But that's not why you watch documentaries, right? You watch documentaries to be informed. This one's pretty good. I wish it spent as much time in its second act talking about life inside the geosphere as it did in its first act, talking about the genesis and construction of the geosphere, and its third act where it talked about its downfall and revival. That second chunk could have been developed a little bit more. I feel like there's a lot of stories to come out of living inside the geosphere, which we just weren't told. And we weren't told because we weren't documented, or we weren't told because they were uninteresting. We might have just been told the most interesting parts, but it just feels like that middle chunk could have been fleshed out a little bit. But for the most part, this movie took me back to my childhood and what it would be like to live in the geosphere. Something we definitely contemplated, but I'm not contemplating now. Emma stars Anya Taylor-Joy as Jane Austen's famous matchmaker. Good at setting everyone else up, but bad in her own love life. This is probably the 18th million incarnation of this story on film. Seems like every few years we're getting a new version of Emma. This is a very good one. Anya Taylor-Joy is very compelling in the lead role. The acting is great across the board. The set design and costume design is top-notch. It's an entertaining, well-made, fun-to-look-at film. If well-worn territory at this point, it's hard to go outside the box when it comes to Jane Austen adaptations. This movie paints by the numbers very well, doesn't do anything outside the ordinary. It takes a story that everyone knows and does it in a new version with different actors. It's all good. It's just not going to be earth-shattering to anyone because we've seen it so many times before. Have you seen any of these movies? I will see you in the comments below, and I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching.